first Outside the Box with Jeff Conine of 2023. And we've got a lot of topics. Of course, I'm Aaron Waiton. He's Jeff Conine. We're going to talk Hall of Fame. We're going to talk players' physicals and the Carlos Correa situation, and then a little bit more on the difference of environment, because we know Jeff was one of the best hitters of all time at Coors Field in Mile High, but we want to talk about how much that should be weighed against Todd Helton and that whole conversation there as well. Niner, how was your new year? How's everything going? And I know it's been a little bit of a whirlwind over the last couple of weeks for you, given that now you got the position with the Marlins. Now we're heading into 2023. How's everything been on your end?
Everything's been great. Happy New Year, by the way. Obviously, as you get up in age, you wouldn't know this yet, but it's pretty low key as far as New Year's is concerned. We stay at home most of the time now and have friends over, and safe and sound. But all is good with the Marlins. Looking forward to spring training and getting real baseball started again, and excited about my position with the team.
I feel like that's one of your favorite things, right? Is kind of getting boots on the ground, getting involved on the field during spring training. Would that be fair to say? I know you did some things during the offseason with MLB, even before you took the position with the Marlins. Like, how much do you enjoy just being out on the ball field and just being able to be a resource to these players? I mean, it's what you did at FIU even as well.
Well, that's my my sweet spot, I guess you'd call it, is that I love instructing. I love talking shop. I love like you said, getting out there with the guys and answering questions and talking through different situations. And, I think I'll do some of that during spring training. We'll get with the outfielders, and, John Jay, I've had some conversations with him, and he's going to be working with the outfielders. So excited to work with him and get stuff going.
So I know I just didn't mention it in the opening, but you kind of spurred a thought in my head here. And I know you haven't had as much time to get to know the entire staff yet, and you will as we get closer to the season. But I know you have some good thoughts about some of the guys that have been brought on. Of course, Skip Schumacher being the manager, you're going to get to know him a little bit more in the future. But guys that you played against, the staff is a lot of grinders, a lot of players who had pretty long big league careers. And I know we spoke about it a little bit another time, but I know you were pretty excited about some of the guys brought on board. And I would love for you to just kind of elaborate a little bit more on that. And, what you think of the way this staff has started to round out around Skip Schumacher, who, I'm really excited to see what he can do.
Yeah. Skip was that type of player, not a superstar, but still a very good major league player for quite a bit of time with one of my favorite organizations. Outside looking in, you look at the St. Louis Cardinals organization and what they did every year to be successful, even though they had a lot of turnover as far as player personnel, front office personnel. It seems like the core values of that organization have never changed, and they flat out win every single year. It doesn't matter who you change in and out. Those pieces, they have them fit into a system that works, and they know it works, and they win every year. So I think Skip's going to bring a lot of that with him to the Marlins organization. I think he's surrounding himself with the type of player he was. John Jay was another guy that, I've talked to at length. He lives down here in South Florida. I was in did his bowling tournament when he used to have his bowling tournament, and just a quality guy that really cares about making players better. Jody Reed, another guy that's a baseball lifer that's been out there, grinder type player that I think is going to do wonders for this team. Rod Barajas is now with the Marlins, who was another type guy that you look across the field and said, hey, I'd like to be a teammate with that guy. So I really like the way the staff has been constructed. I think there's a lot of great baseball people involved, and now it's all about transferring all that knowledge and the way to play the game to the players, and hopefully they buy in.
Do you feel like the grinders make sometimes the best coaches, the guys that really had to work hard to figure it out and maximize every ounce of their ability? Do you feel like there's a correlation there through your experience?
Oh, absolutely, because I think those guys realize how important it is to play baseball the right way. And, we throw that term around a lot. Oh, you got to play it the right way. But I'm talking about, this team is not going to be a team constructed to wait back and get 3-run homers to win games. They're going to have to produce runs. And I think those grinder type players know how to get a guy over. No situational hitting, no situational base running, no situational defensive play. So all that combined, I think the baseball IQ of the Marlins is going to go way up when these guys take over.
Which I'm really excited about because, that's something that, with a lot of young players, a lot of guys that, could make that leap next year with some of the fundamentals focused on and some of the little things that could be huge. And also base running. When we're talking about what I was watching with the Marlins last year. And I know you've talked about this across the whole league. This isn't a Marlins unique thing, but I think the Marlins were kind of one of the prime examples of this is that base running is a bit of a lost art in the game. And you've talked about this on the podcast. And I feel like the staff that is built around, including now you being involved there, there's going to be some better base running and some better, little between the margin type things that can help you win ball games, especially when, you're in a division where it's going to be tough. You're not going to be able to stack up player to player with some of these other teams, but you can still win ball games. And you've been part of teams that didn't stack up maybe quote unquote player to player going into the season, but did all of their little things right to kind of take it to the next level. What are you most excited about before we go to the Hall of Fame talk? What are you most excited about for this upcoming season, personally and kind of for the team?
Well, it's about progress. For myself personally, it's where can I help? I'm here to help across the board. I'm hoping to help on the field. I'm hoping to help, with the baseball side or the business side of it, and help the Marlins get some better marketing going and some kind of turn that ship around of the woe is me Miami fan and say, let's get on board with this team. Let's get on board with the players that we have. I'm excited to see what this coaching staff is going to put together as far as, is there going to be like a Marlins way? They're going to create something that everyone in the entire organization can grab a hold of and strive towards every day, which, I think the great organizations, they instill this cardinal way or, Diamondbacks. I told you when I went to the Diamondbacks, they have the way they have created this culture there. And it's all about creating this culture and players have to buy into it first and foremost, but the leadership has to define what that is and sell it to everybody, and everyone has to buy in.
So you're a culture guy.
I'm a big time culture guy. I'm all about being a part of something that is bigger than yourself. Yep. My AA manager always said, you're playing for the name on the front, not the name on the back. So in the end, yes, you're trying to maximize your personal stats and potential so you can move on. And, it's a very short career we have in this game. So I'm all about maximizing your time and being able to earn as much as you can. But at the same time, we're here to win. We put on a uniform to win. We're part of a team, and I'm a big time culture guy.
And it's funny because you can look across sports and it seems like some of the most successful franchises beyond baseball are franchises, organizations that have that culture, top to bottom and have that buy-in. And I think having the right staff and the right leadership is the first step. And I think this is part of the reason why I'm really excited for this year, because, especially after you told me how you felt about a lot of the people that are coming in and going to be alongside and around Skip and how excited you were about that with you now involved too. I feel like that's a great first step to instilling that culture in this kind of next phase of the organization. Speaking to long careers and someone who had a really long one, and maybe one of the things that I give you the most credit for tipping me off on, because once you told me about this, I became very hell-bent on it. It was Fred McGriff, right? You said Fred McGriff should be in the Hall of Fame. And once you said that, it really just kind of was singed in my brain. I'm like, how is this dude not in the Hall of Fame? Well, we have the Veterans Committee who finally elects Fred McGriff and he gets in. And this was extremely exciting because, again, this guy, statistically speaking, phenomenal, right? 493 home runs, 284, 377, 509 slash line. He played for 19 years. He was decorated. He played the game by, as far as I know, and this is where I'm excited for you to kind of color it in the right way. And, just was a well-rounded ball player. We've talked about him in the past, and I didn't know how long it was going to be or if we would ever actually see him get in. And here he is. First off, did you think he would get in this quickly? And second off, how excited are you for somebody that belongs in there? It feels like justice, which with the Hall of Fame recently, it's been wishy-washy. There's a lot of debate and a lot of things, and it just felt like this was one of those things that wasn't really debatable. So it was interesting that, it took a while, but finally in this time where we're debating a lot of things beyond baseball, the guy that purely it was just a baseball argument, finally gets in.
Yeah, when I first saw that list that came out of, I think it was 8 guys on that list, and I'm scanning down and I stop at Fred McGriff and I'm like, this is it right here. This is a chance. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. We've spoken about it. I played against him, and, just one of those consummate professionals. The guy was so consistent his whole career, not only statistically wise, but just demeanor. He'd get out there and he played the game the same way every single night in, night out. And, it was great to compete against him. And I'm glad to see he finally got his due and recognition to be in the Hall of Fame, because he deserved it.
And what was it that you think made him so good? Because I know it's the power. I know it's the consistency too. I mean, hitting 284 with the near 500 home runs is pretty remarkable. And a guy that you probably crossed paths on when he was in Atlanta, you were with the Marlins, at least for a few of those years, right? 94, 95. You saw a lot of him, right?
Yep. Yeah, I saw a lot of them. Too much of them sometimes.
Yeah, that 94.
He's one of those guys that you didn't want to be holding a guy on first when he's up at the plate, because it's awful close there. That's a very close 90 feet when he's got an inside fastball to turn on. But that's just it. He's one of those guys, you talk about wanting to be a teammate of, or looking across the field and just know that the guy played the game the right way and was a great guy in the clubhouse and just very, very well respected. Fred McGriff for me embodied kind of all of it. He was a ball player.
And one of the big topics now is this, current Hall of Fame ballot. And, we've talked about the steroid guys, we've talked about all that, but a topic that I texted you about, because I think it's really fascinating, is Todd Helton. And I think you can speak to this even more, I think with a little bit more insight than one, the average person, because you played baseball for a very long time, but two, because you really reap the rewards. You could probably speak to it even more than the average player, because you really reap the rewards of Coors Field. And I'm sure you've had moments where you think about, well, what if I played at Coors Field? We've talked about it with the expansion draft and how you were kind of hoping to go there. At the same time, there's a level of, no matter where you're playing, if you hit 316 for your career and you do what Todd Helton did, hitting 372 in a single season, flirting with 400 as long as he did in the modern era, is absolutely absurd. But at the same time, there's the big home run splits, and that's something that's held Helton back a little bit. What's your take on all this? And I'm not going to, make you say, hey, is he a Hall of Famer or not? I would just love a little bit more, context from somebody who experienced it, right? Kind of experienced the benefit that comes with Coors Field, but at the same time, understands how hard it is to do it year in and year out, no matter where you're playing. And that's pretty much what Todd Helton did. What are your thoughts on the whole Todd Helton debate here, and any perspective that you can kind of add to that?
Well, I mean, you're talking about another one of my favorite players that I played against was Todd Helton. Talk about, playing the game hard every single day. And that guy had grit, and he had leadership, and he could just flat out rake. He could play first base. I didn't enjoy going to Coors Field when he was playing first base, because I knew he had a lot of hands in beating us on many, many occasions. So when you respect a guy like that, when you look across that field and say that, I could see him being a Hall of Famer one day. Yes, the numbers probably haven't amassed like some of the Hall of Famers that we've seen get in recently. What's he got, like 360 some home runs, which now by nowadays standards is kind of short for a Hall of Famer. But when you embody just the whole work that he did over his career, did he dominate in his era? And I think he did. I think he was one of the premier players at his or any other position in the era that he played in.
How different is it pitch movement wise? Because we know what the field is like. And one of my favorite points you've brought up, because everyone always talks about, oh, the ball carries out there. Yeah, sure. But when you're a contact oriented hitter, which you were, and Todd Helton was, I mean, you guys hit home runs, but at the end of the day, you guys were putting the ball in play consistently. It seemed like you guys kind of reap the rewards even more, because you got so much space to work with in the outfield. And then you've brought that point up in the past. But the other thing that I think is interesting is people look at the home road splits, and a lot of times guys really struggle away from Coors, but it's beyond just because of the fact that you get the bump from Coors. It's also when you go elsewhere, the ball starts moving a little bit more right too, because you look at a Nolan Arenado, he seems to have figured it out, away from Coors, and he was a guy that had some dramatic splits. How different was the movement profile on these pitches when you were out there? Was that something that you noticed at all? Can you speak to that much?
They said, yeah, because of the thin air that fastballs weren't moving quite as much. Curveballs, sliders didn't have as much break as they do at sea level. I didn't notice like a glaring difference. If they're talking an inch or two, all right, but it wasn't like, oh my God, the ball doesn't break here. I still saw sinkers. I still saw sliders.
Yeah.
And ball moved there just like anywhere else, probably a fraction less. I think the biggest benefit from Coors is the confidence factor, because like we talked about, you look out there, this field is so massive. There's so much grass out there. It's almost like you're hitting into a canyon. I'm like, hell, I can get hits out here. I can get a flare. I can get a ball in the gap that's going to split a gap that, in a small ballpark, someone's going to run it down, but here they're too far away. And everyone's afraid of getting, the outfielders always, their number one fear is getting the ball hit over their head. So everyone plays super deep at Coors Field, even though the ball carries. If it's over your head, it's going to be out anyway. So, as we had this discussion a while ago, I think they should have made it regular dimensions, put higher walls out in the outfield, but let the playing acreage be kind of on par with every other field. But going there, like I've told you, is like, if I'm in a slump and I'm struggling, I just look on the schedule to see when I'm going to Coors Field, because I know I'm going to get out of it. I know I'm getting hits. And just that confidence factor is what I think benefits you as much, if anything, than the actual ballpark.
As a guy who has run plenty in his life, doing the Ironman, I know you've done marathons, you've done everything, you've climbed mountains. So I know you've gotten used to that. But I was watching a basketball game yesterday, and they did like a halftime interview with one of the players who they were visiting the Nuggets. I think it was the Clippers visiting the Nuggets, and they said, they were getting boat raced. I think they were down 30 at half. And asked him, what's it like to compete out here, with this altitude? How tough is it? And he said, it sucks, which I was surprised to hear him say that, but he said it sucks. It's really tough to play up here. Obviously, baseball, it's a little different. But before I moved on to the next topic, I just wanted to ask you, from your experience of just, you are a guy that runs a lot, has really good cardiovascular endurance. Did you feel like there was a difference there if you were pitching or whatever, that where you could see maybe guys running out of gas earlier from that altitude? Like, how different is it for an athlete that is trying to sustain endurance? Fortunately for hitters, not much of a problem, but just generally speaking.
Yeah, I can definitely see for the pitching side of it, there's not as much oxygen, so you're not going to get as much oxygen in your blood to your muscles. I think you fatigue more quickly up there for sure. And that's another home field advantage that Coors has, is that those guys are kind of used to it. So they should play better in that if you're more acclimated to the altitude. I remember when I was at Mile High, I was in AAA playing against the Brewers, and I hit a ball to dead center field, and Mile High had a massive center field. It was like 430 feet or something like that. So I crushed the ball out there, and the center fielder's running back, tries to catch it, hits off the wall, and he goes down. So I'm on my horse, man. I'm like, he goes down. The other outfielders are trying to get to the ball. So I'm like, I'm scoring. And I tell you, man, when I crossed home plate, I damn near passed out. I was like seeing stars, because, I don't have many inside the park home runs in my entire career, but that one, like, that's when I really felt it. Like, I got back to the bench and I was gassed. Like, just that one sprint around the bases like that totally threw me off and exhausted me. So I think it definitely throws a factor when you talk about playing basketball or hockey at that or football. I mean, my goodness, that would be a challenge for a visiting team for sure.
What kind of shape were you in then, though? Because again, that was before marathon Jeff Conine. That was before.
Yeah, but I was just post, national racquetball caliber Jeff Conine. So I was in good shape. I was in very good shape.
That says a lot.
I still played a lot of racquetball back then. So I was probably in better anaerobic shape than I was later on in aerobic shape. Wow. So that's when I felt it.
Wow. I mean, that's ridiculous. And that's something I always think of. And I'm like, if I ever get the opportunity to ask someone that's competed at that level, like I'll ski or snowboard, I go up the stairs or just walk around and I'm gassing, but it's me, it's not saying as much, but yeah, that from you, that says a lot. I'm going to try to dig up that video, by the way. I would love to see if I can find your arms flailing around third as you're trying to get
AAA. So I don't know if anything's,
that's going to be hard. Yeah, that's going to be hard.
That's going to be hard.
That's the other thing too in the minor leagues. You have the Pacific Coast League, and some of those stadiums out there are like the moon as well. And seeing the way some of these offensive numbers jump up is pretty wild. Before we move on to Correa and physicals and all that stuff, again, I know you were a Todd Helton fan, so I'm not going to put you on the spot of whether you think he should or whatever. But how do you think voters should approach in general? Because Larry Walker is a guy that, I mean, he had the opportunity to play elsewhere and kind of show it elsewhere, which I think helped his case, but it was up till the final moment with him. How do you think voters, writers, if I am ever lucky enough to cast a vote, I can promise you I'm going to be consulting you for your thoughts here and there. And what would you advise me if I asked you, how should I approach voting on players who played a majority of their career at Coors Field? What would you tell me?
I would say, yes, the numbers are going to be skewed. Visiting numbers are skewed. My numbers are skewed there. Everyone's numbers are going to be skewed there, but you got to take into account, was this player a dominant player, not only there, but away from there? And unfortunately, I think the first thing that everyone goes to when they are going to have a Rockies player come up for the Hall is that, nope, he's not worthy because he played at Coors Field. And like you said, there are other Hall of Famers that had some awful splits that are in the Hall of Fame. So I wouldn't discount a player just because he played at Coors Field, because Todd Helton was, like I said, a top 5 player in our game for as long as he played our game. And as long as I played against him, he was a top 5 guy. And that's all there is to it. He could flat out rake. And he played a Gold Glove first base as well.
Yeah. If you, on the flip side too, right? You have, let's say you have a pitcher. I don't know if this has ever really come up yet, but you have a pitcher that pitched a majority of his career at Coors and he's just outside of the Hall. Are we pushing him in then at that point with that logic? It would only be fair to apply it that way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, I think it would probably apply even more on the pitching side, because it's expected that they won't perform as well at Coors than everywhere else. So those numbers, I think, in most people's minds will skew downward, where, the offense skews upwards. But I think the hitter gets a short end of the stick there.
I'm waiting for the pitcher that's brave enough to pitch 15 seasons at Coors and has a Hall of Fame case up there. Because from your experience, I mean, that's got to be a big deterrent, right? I always wonder, if you're the general manager of the Colorado Rockies, how do you convince guys to come there? How do you convince guys to come pitch there? It's got to be really tough.
Yeah.
Money
There's
talks.
There's a good way to entice guys, because
okay,
the numbers might be skewed a little bit, but Denver's an awesome place to play. It's an awesome stadium to play in. There's a lot of positive factors that go into that, and they might have to overpay a little bit to get guys to play there, because their numbers are going to be skewed a little bit. But hell, I would have enjoyed playing there.
Where was your least favorite place to hit?
You always look at your least favorite places to hit because you didn't really have success there. So, I always say Coors Field because I hit really well there.
But there wasn't like an environment or like stadium, like, I look at Detroit, you look at Comerica, right? Like Nick Castellanos, big doubles guy, big gap to gap guy. And a lot of his doubles were just erased, or a lot of his home runs turned into either doubles or were run down in the gaps. And he got extremely frustrated, went to Cincinnati and put up crazy numbers there. Right. Was there anywhere where you just felt like when you either didn't see the ball well, or you didn't, really, you felt like you square it up and it gets caught and run down at the track? The reason why I'm asking you this is, if there was a place like that, I was going to ask how much more it would take for you to play at that place, like to sign with that team. Just out of curiosity.
I'm trying to remember if there's any places that I just like, oh God, I hate hitting here. I don't think I ever really hit well at Fenway. I don't know if that,
which is wild, because that's actually one of the more hitter friendly.
Yeah. I don't know if I did hit well at Wrigley. I always thought that I didn't, because maybe you pointed this out.
Yeah, I did.
I played so many day games, and I didn't like playing day games, but apparently I hit very well in day games. So I hit well at Wrigley, but I don't think I hit well at Fenway. I don't know if that wall got in my head. Like, you're trying, I got to try to pull the ball and get it off the wall or get it up over the wall. I just don't remember hitting the ball well there at all.
Which is interesting, because again, it is one of those like very hitter friendly parks statistically, but There's got to be some guys that just have that barrier there with the big wall. It's pretty bizarre if you really think about it, but you're also able to kind of play pepper with it if you get used to that. So it's one of the more unique ballparks. I know you don't like the historic ones from a visiting standpoint as much, which is always a funny conversation, but I want to talk a little bit about Carlos Correa, and not as much about the details of the contract and the situation and this and that, more about just what's happening from a player's perspective in terms of, when you were playing, we didn't see the 10, 12, 13-year deals as much, right? But you have been in a front office and part of an organization as those deals started to come out. And, even were involved with the Marlins when they gave that deal to Giancarlo Stanton, right? So we've seen it, and you've kind of seen the process that goes into it. And Carlos Correa is one of the best players in Major League Baseball. There's no doubting that. He's great on, in the field. He's great with the stick. And unfortunately, he signs this big time deal, or doesn't sign it yet, but agrees to this big time deal with the Giants. Red flag in the physical. What ends up being really interesting and bizarre to me is that the Mets come in here and do the same thing. And then they're surprised that their doctors see the same thing as the other renowned doctors with the Giants and have the red flag. And now, as we're recording this on January 6th at 2:38 p.m., it's looking a little bit more bleak with the Mets, and there's no deal even close at this point. I don't want to get into I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about that. And speculation's ridiculous there. But from the standpoint of a player, what is the physical process like? Is it a different physical for a 2-year deal versus a 10-year deal? Is it more encompassing? How does that all work? It sounds like such a basic, dumbed down question, but I think the average listener will have no idea. How different was a Carlos Correa physical maybe from, a 2-year deal that was signed, maybe even what Gene Segura just went through with the Marlins with his physical? What are the differences between those two?
Well, the differences are, yes, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars difference when you look at a 2-year deal versus a Correa type 10 to 13-year deal. So they go over every inch of this guy's body. They will X-ray everything. They got MRIs on everything. They will go dig into the past, anytime he's ever been on the DL. Why was he on the DL? If he's ever had surgery, what was that surgery all about? And they will scrutinize every piece of this information because hundreds of millions of dollars are at stake here. And you don't want to lose that productivity and give the guy that kind of glue when there might be some problems in 3 or 4 years. I mean, listen, all these deals, I think you're naive to the fact if you think that every one of these players is going to be productive in the years 8 through 13. They're not. Their production is going to go way down just because you're an aging athlete. Verlander is a freak, and he's done something that we are not used to seeing at all. Ichiro is a freak that he still was productive at 41, 42, 43 years old. Nelson Cruz is doing stuff that no other 40-year-old has done as far as hitting the ball out of the ballpark. But those are so rare that when you look at all these other guys, there's a reason why there's free agency after 6 years. And there's a reason why you don't see many guys playing past their 35th birthday. It's hard. So when you're investing that kind of money, I think these owners are like, you know what? I want 100% certainty that there's nothing in the past that can affect his future play. And, I don't know much about this injury he had in 2014, but yeah, you're talking 8 years ago. And I don't think there's been a problem with that injury in the 8 years since then. So to me, it sounds like there's something else that is in play here, that maybe that injury isn't it, but there's an underlying somewhere other injury condition, something that they're leery about, because you wouldn't think that two teams would back out of deals like this.
So that's the big thing, right? And especially a Steve Cohen-led Mets where money is a figment of our imagination, right? And that's what I wanted to ask you too, because as a player, I can't imagine what it's like to be putting up numbers and just imagining you try to put yourself in his shoes here, right? You're putting up numbers consistently. You're totally healthy. You haven't had any, major injuries since this presumed red flag in 2014, which is the plate in his leg that he had, which I think he aggravated, and that was about it. But what would it be like? I was trying to think about this, of just a team of doctors basically saying, yeah, we're worried about your leg. It's not holding up, but you've been performing year after year after year and you feel fine physically. Is that kind of what leads you to think there's more to it? Because again, he's been performing the last few years. He's been on the field for the most part the last couple of years, aside from some very small, minor, unrelated injuries. I think he had something like a concussion or something random like that, or COVID bout or something like that during the season. It was other things that caused him to miss time. But what would it be like from that perspective of they're telling you that your body's not right, but you feel just fine? I can't really imagine what that dynamic is.
We don't know that for sure either.
Yeah.
He might actually be hurting all the time. And maybe a trainer said something, or maybe a teammate said something like, oh my God, he's going out there every day, but he ain't 100% because, of this, or we don't know what's been said, which just makes me believe that there's more to the story than we know. And maybe it's because the Mets are trying to play on it and say, hey, the Giants found something, we'll give you a year less for all this. But, now they're trying to back out and say, forget it. I think you're only good for 6 years. We'll give you a 6-year deal. I don't know what is in play here, but I wouldn't be surprised if something out at some point saying that Correa might have had something that held this deal up other than what they saw in the 2014 injury.
How often, through your experience, is this something that you think is more common now because of just how careful teams are and how much more money's being thrown around? Like, how often did you kind of see this thing kind of come up when you were playing, or because of the lack of media, you really didn't know whether it was happening or not as your teammates were signing deals or just peers were signing deals elsewhere?
You know what? Like you said, I never had this situation when I played. Our long-term deals were 4 years, 5 years, 6 years was like, oh my God, somebody got 6 years. That's crazy. And I think Sheffield got a 6-year, $60 million deal when he was with the Marlins. And I'm like, that is insane. That's craziness. Can't even think about it. And now they're going 12, 13, 14 years. I mean, it doesn't even compute in my brain that there's a deal that's that long and that much money, so I can't even compare it to when we had it. I know, I was a free agent one time. I signed a deal and it was just like my regular physical. They just checked me out and, how's everything feel? I'm like, great. And off I went, I signed the deal where, like I said, these guys with the technology now, they can look into everything and they might be, looking at cardiovascular systems and 3D imaging of brains and all kinds of stuff that we don't even know about.
Which is almost like crazy. It gets to the point too where it's, you wonder with the Players Association and just protecting these players to a degree too, because there's almost a certain level of how much of me do you need to see inside and out? Like what is fair? Where are my boundaries? Do you think that's something that players will ever, try to push back on at a certain point of like, there's a difference between maybe physical and inspecting every inch of my soul? Or do you think this is just kind of where we're heading as science advances and more money's being thrown around, that the players may not have, a leg to stand on? That's probably a poor use of a poor term as we're talking about Correa, but may not have like a position there when this much money is being thrown around.
I don't think the players can get upset over the owners want to do their due diligence and know exactly what they're getting into, and they get a product, and you're a product on the field. That's what you're being signed up for, is to perform. So it would be no different than a racehorse. You're paying $1 million for a racehorse. You're going to get that thing checked out to the nth degree. And if there's one little tiny problem, you're not going to give them that $1 million for that racehorse. So I don't want to liken a baseball player to a racehorse, but the investment is for potential and the investment is for production. And that's what they're investing in. That's what an owner is investing in. You're investing in Carlos Correa as a player that's going to be a productive cornerstone for your franchise for a long time, better part of a decade. They want to know exactly what they're getting.
So now that we see these contracts just getting bigger, longer and longer, but at the same time, we've seen many of them age relatively poorly, right? And that's something we've talked about a little bit in the past, but that was before this monstrous offseason, which I think is going to be remembered similar to the NBA offseason. And I've seen some there was the infamous NBA offseason where a lot of, mid-level players signed major deals. And, for the next 5+ years, a lot of teams couldn't get out from under those contracts. I don't know if that happens as much here because you still had that difference of tiers of really the elite players were really the only ones getting the mega deals. But do you think that this is a bubble, or do you think that this is a consistent trend that we're seeing here? Because this does come after labor peace. This does come after MLB continues to have good years in the revenue department. And also there was some little things here and there that brought in more revenue for Major League Baseball. But do you think this is a consistent trend that we're just going to see go upwards, or is there a stagnation maybe on the way with the way that these contracts have just exploded over this offseason?
Well, I think, there's a reason why the contracts have exploded, and the revenue's coming in. Like you said, I think if the revenue wasn't coming in, then probably these offers wouldn't be like they are. But when you look at the mega deals and the mega contracts, there's only about 10 teams in the league that can afford to pay these deals. You got the New York teams, the Chicago teams, the LA teams. These are the teams that have all the money coming in, and they're going to be able to afford more pricier players than the Marlins or the Rays or the A's. There's just no revenue to back that up in those markets. So, but I do think it's going to level out here and maybe regress a little bit in the future, because it's just so crazy, the spike that it's taken, and to continue on like it is, I think is just, I don't think it can sustain that. I don't know for how much longer, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 5 years from now. I don't know, but I just don't see how this level of increase can be sustainable.
So we were doing the Just Baseball show, and Jack McMullen, my co-host, just asked me a very simple question that really I had to pause in the middle of the episode and think about it. So I'm going to do the same thing to you. And I'll give you ahead of it. My answer was yes, but, and then I want to see what your but is. Is Steve Cohen good for baseball? Just that question right there. Is the amount of money that Steve Cohen is spending right now in the polarity now that we're seeing because of it, is that good for baseball, or are those two separate things? Because I think a lot of these teams, find themselves fighting a different battle here, right? It's a different race, but at the same time, I'm always going to be here for, teams spending more money and putting the best product on the field possible. It's a pretty complex question.
It is. And I think he's great for baseball. He's great for New York fans. Those fans want him to go out and put together the best possible team they can. And he's doing that. So you can't fault him just because he's super rich and wants to do this. And there's no rules that are in place to negate the fact that he can spend whatever he wants. Yes, there's a luxury tax, but obviously he doesn't give a crap about that. But I think people lose the sight of the fact that the Yankees did this for 20 years. They outspent everyone.
Was it that dramatic? I've never really looked back. $200
million per year. They went far and above everybody else for the longest time. And then finally, I think they got some fiscal responsibility. Said, hey, we got to rein ourselves in a little bit here. Recently, the Dodgers, they're 300 million plus every single year. So it's not like, Steve Cohen's doing something that is the most craziest thing in baseball. Yeah, he's gone crazy this offseason and put a lot of extra dollars into that payroll. But we've seen it before, and not maybe to this extreme, but it's been happening a lot with the Yankees. You don't hear about them much recently, but 2000s, 2010s, they put some major dollars on that field. And, like I said, early on, especially the late 90s, early 2000s, they had the best teams because they had the best players and they could afford them.
Yeah. And I'm interested to see if more teams start doing what the Atlanta Braves are doing, which is you got your young players, you roll the dice, you leverage those control years, those arbitration years, and you sign them affordably, right? We see Michael Harris come up, dominate for 80 games, and they're like, all right, we'll take a chance. You want to sign a 7-8 year deal, for $70 million. They did the same thing with Acuna for $100 million. And, that looks like it's going to be a steal. They did the same thing with Albies for $35 million. The last question I'll ask you in regards to money before we move on to the jersey is the pre-arb deals. I always think it's fascinating because it's a lot of people phrase it like a bet on yourself, right? Let's say just to make it easy, you have 3 years of team control still left on your contract, and you're performing well. 3 years is a long time. a lot of things can happen. God forbid, you get injured or worse, or what, so you could lose your eyesight. You could get worse at playing. Like you could just lose it, right? Like you've probably seen that happen. How many times? Guy comes up, lights it up. I think of a Chris Coughlin back in the day, right? In today's game, he might have gotten offered a pre-arb deal that year. If he signs it, he probably would have had a little bit more sustained, financial stability there. He hung around long enough. I'm sure he did just fine. But if you were in that position, would you strongly consider that pre-arb deal? Because it's something that I think is really kind of taken over baseball. And I like it because it gives these players financial security. It does give them below the market value, but it is still a calculated risk for these teams. Where do you stand on that? And if you were in that position, would you take the deal, or would it really depend on how well you were playing?
I think it comes down to the confidence the player has in himself, which you'd be surprised how many big league players aren't the most confident people. So I would say you're going to see majority of players going to take a deal like that because of all those factors that you say. It's security for one. I mean, 70 million, 40 after taxes, that's setting you up for life. That's all there is to it. You're done. But is the player confident enough in himself, a la Aaron Judge was this year, saying, nope, I'm not going to take that deal. I think I'm going to have a monster year. And he did. He had one of the greatest years that we've ever seen. And he parlayed that into about 130 million more than he got offered pre-spring training, So I would have taken it for sure, because I think it's just a smart move. How much do you really need? Yeah, if you're that good, I mean, you're going to get another deal after that pre-arb deal that these guys are getting right now. I mean, and you're talking about 22-year-olds, 21-year-olds. They're going to be in their prime when these deals are up at 28, 29. I would definitely take it.
I stand in the same boat, and people say, oh yeah, I would bet on myself, whatever. And I'm like, if I show you a room with $80 million in it, you can open the door and take it. You're going to close that door and say, I'll bet on myself for 3 more years so I can have 2 of those rooms. Like, it's easier said than done, especially in a humbling sport like baseball, right? Maybe you don't have the physical liability as a player as much as a football, but it's so humbling, and you can go from figuring it out to lost pretty quickly, a la Cody Bellinger and things like that. So, I even think some of the most confident guys are still willing to take that deal. I look at Ronald Acuna. I don't know if there's anybody that loves themselves more than Ronald Acuna, but he took the deal, and everyone talks about, oh, he's so underpaid. I'll happily be underpaid for $100 million. And look, he had that ACL tear. I still think he's going to be great. He'll be fine, but it's just another reminder of like, hey, he's human. Who knows what can happen?
But if he didn't sign that deal and has that ACL tear and then has a subpar year, it's like, oh, teams are going to be like, all right, we're going to go year to year from now on.
Absolutely. And he took a step back last year. I think he bounces back, but clearly the knee was bothering him. So I think that's an excellent point. Jersey time. And I think I'm going to get this one first try. I'm feeling myself
better. If you
Todd Helton.
Yeah, if we don't, I mean, I'm just walking away right now. I will never do this again.
Todd Helton is the jersey, right? Let's see it. Oh, that's an awesome jersey. For those watching on YouTube, a nice little note there too. Let's see if I can read it. What does it say? It says, to Jeff, thanks for, do you remember what it says? No, but I can tell you what most of your jerseys say. I can tell the listener what most of the jerseys say. It's something about sharing the field with you. Thanks for letting me share the field with you, I think is what it says. All the best.
Yeah,
so
sounds right.
What I've seen most of your jerseys say, which is very, very, very unsurprising, is appreciating the way you played the game and, admiring the way you played the game. And this was coming from like Ozzie Smith and from, some of the better players to ever step between the lines. What did that mean for you to like, I know you're not a big pat yourself on the back guy. You're one of the more humble guys I know, but I mean, do you ever just look at that and read that and just kind of like, or did you ever, when it happened, just soak that in? I mean, guys that, I know you were starstruck at times to see in the All-Star game, leaving you a note saying that they admired the way you played the game. I mean, I can't even imagine what that's like.
Yeah, it's, obviously very gratifying because I wanted to be known as, A, a great teammate, B, a guy that went out there every night and gave as much as he could every night. And when you read your peers say nice stuff like that about you, then it's like, you know what? I did it right. I played the game the right way.
And you did.
That was more important to me than about anything.
And you did just that. You did it really well. And you also played the game pretty well, statistically speaking also. That'll do it for this episode. I guess I want your final prediction. And again, it's not what you prefer, because I think you kind of gave us that thought, but do you think that Todd Helton gets in eventually?
I would say he would have my vote, but I think it's going to be a struggle for him to get in. Because of all the stuff we discussed, and just
I'm with you.
The amass of numbers and that Coors Field black cloud hanging over him. He's got my vote, but I think it's going to take a lot of convincing for a lot of other people. We'll see.
Next time we talk, I want to talk Carlos Beltran as well. First year on the ballot. I saw some writers say, hey, not voting for him this time, but maybe next time, which I don't get.
I never got that. The numbers are the same. They're not going to change in 1 year, year 1 or year 5.
The only way that makes sense.
Vote for him, or you're not going to vote for him.
The only way that makes sense is if you have 10 votes and you leave the one guy off because it's his first year on the ballot and he's got more time. It's the only way that makes sense. But none of these guys have a full ballot. And there's I'm not voting for him first year on that. It makes no sense. If you're going to vote for him later, you should vote for him now. I can understand someone convincing you, or maybe you look at the numbers over the year. And Jason Stark has talked about that, when we had him on. Like, the more I looked at it over the years, I started to talk myself into this guy being a Hall of Famer. That I get. But I'll vote for him later, but not this year. To me, that's BS.
That makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll end on that one. But always great talking to you. We'll circle back on some Beltran talk and some more stuff as we get closer to the season. I also am excited to get some of your thoughts on the World Baseball Classic, which is creeping up. It's going to be in Miami. I know you'll probably be at some games. Hopefully we'll go together to one or two. And I'm excited to start talking about that. So we will circle back in the next week or so and talk about that, and continue to see how these really frustrating Hall of Fame ballots come in.
Yeah, sounds good, Arm.
All right. Appreciate it, Niner.
Take care.